All right, so you guys sent in a ton of stuff this time, all about the friend zone.
Yeah, it looks like it's a pretty popular topic.
It is, for sure, and trying to understand it, and especially trying to talk about it in English.
Yeah, especially for people who, English isn't their first language, that can add a whole other layer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to pull out the most useful stuff, the most surprising stuff from everything you sent.
See if we can help you navigate this whole friend zone thing.
Yeah, because it can be tricky.
Yeah, it can be.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
What are we even talking about when we say friend zone?
Okay, so basically the friend zone is when you have two people in a friendship and one of them starts to have romantic feelings,
Right,
but the other person only sees them as a friend.
right. Just wants to stay friends.
Exactly. And the material that you sent really emphasizes that this isn't some kind of punishment.
Right.
Like, it's not a bad place to be inherently. It's just a situation where you have two people and their feelings and their expectations about the relationship are different.
Yeah, it's like, I saw this one article that was talking about it, and they were saying, it's not like you're stuck in detention.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's not a punishment. You're not a bad person.
Right.
It's just that maybe your desires and their desires aren't lining up romantically at this time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mismatch.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a lot of ideas out there about the friend zone.
Oh, tons.
What are some of the big misunderstandings that we need to tackle?
Okay, so one of the biggest myths I think that we see is that if you're in the friend zone, you're stuck there forever.
Yeah, you're doomed.
Yeah, doomed. Yeah. And the material really kind of pushes back against that because
Okay.
relationships are fluid. Things can change over time and oftentimes they change through communication.
Right.
So, it's not a permanent label by any means.
I like that.
Yeah.
What's another one?
Another myth is that it's always somebody's fault. Like somebody messed up and now they're in the friend zone.
Right, someone's the bad guy.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But a lot of the material suggests that, it's often just a case of like mismatched expectations
Yeah.
or even just bad timing.
Right person, wrong time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So, it's not necessarily that somebody did something wrong.
Yeah, it's rarely a simple case of, good guy, bad guy.
Right.
Okay, so what about the last one?
The last big myth is that the only way to get out of the friend zone is to use some kind of like trick or manipulation.
Oh yeah, all the like pickup artist stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And the sources that you sent really strongly suggest that that's not the way to go.
Okay.
The best approach is honest and respectful communication.
Right. Just be genuine.
Be genuine. Just talk to the person.
It's so much better.
Yeah.
Much more mature.
Yeah.
Now, your material also talks about like the emotional side of this.
Right.
It's not just like a logical problem. It can really bring up some feelings.
Yeah.
What are some of the feelings that people have to deal with?
Yeah. A lot of times people feel frustrated
Right.
or disappointed when their feelings aren't returned.
Of course.
There can be some confusion about, what the relationship actually is.
Right.
But what's interesting is that, the sources also point out that this is a chance for growth.
Oh, okay.
That dealing with these situations can actually help you understand yourself better
Oh, that's great.
and kind of grow as a person.
So even if it doesn't work out romantically,
Right.
there's still something positive to take away.
Exactly.
Okay, so we kind of have a basic idea of what the friend zone is,
Right.
and we've cleared up some misconceptions.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out a little bit.
Okay.
How does this whole friend zone thing look different in different cultures?
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So your sources show that how people view these male-female friendships and what they consider romantic can vary so much from culture to culture.
Right.
In some places, a close friendship between a man and a woman is totally normal.
Yeah.
And there's no automatic assumption that it's going to turn romantic.
Right.
But in other cultures, there might be these more traditional roles and clearer lines between what's friendship and what's romance.
Right.
And so these cultural differences can really affect how the whole friend zone thing is understood and talked about.
Yeah. It's like the same situation in one culture would be like, oh, that's the friend zone.
Right.
And then another culture would be like, what are you talking about? They're just friends.
Exactly. Yeah. And that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings.
For sure.
Yeah.
And on top of that, one of the things that the material talks about is how gender roles and stereotypes play a part.
Yes.
Like in some cultures, it's expected that the guy makes the first move.
Right.
and the woman is supposed to be more passive.
Right.
And the ideas about like what's romantic behavior, what's not,
Yeah.
can just add this whole other layer of complexity
Absolutely.
and kind of contribute to these friend zone situations.
Yeah, because if you're coming from a background where men are supposed to do this and women are supposed to do that, then it's going to affect how you see the whole friend zone dynamic.
So we all have our own baggage, basically.
Yeah, we do.
That we bring to these situations. So how do we even start to navigate these potential cultural differences in understanding?
So the sources suggest that it's really important to question these stereotypes that we have in our minds and to have these open, honest conversations where you truly respect the other person's point of view.
Respect is so important.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond assumptions.
Right.
And engaging in a real dialogue to try to understand each other better.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to what I feel like is the most important part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Communication.
Communication. It all comes back to communication.
How important is clear communication when it comes to managing expectations?
Oh, it's vital.
Right.
It's absolutely vital.
In any relationship.
Yeah, in any relationship, but especially in these situations where you have these potentially unreciprocated feelings.
Right.
Yeah, the material really emphasizes that, talking openly and honestly about your feelings and your intentions early on can really help prevent a lot of misunderstandings down the road.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And it also highlights this need for respectful conversations to kind of figure out how to move forward.
Right.
Whether that's staying friends or exploring a romantic relationship.
Right.
It's a delicate situation.
Yeah.
And clear communication is your best tool.
Now our listener, English might not be your first language.
Right.
And your material actually talks specifically about how important clear English communication is in these sensitive relationship discussions.
Yeah. Why is that so important?
I think it's so important because when you're dealing with something that's already emotionally complex, and then you add on top of that the challenge of expressing yourself in a second language.
Yeah.
It can be so easy to have misunderstandings or just not quite get your point across in the way that you intended.
Right. Yeah. So, being able to express yourself clearly in English is essential for a few reasons. First, it helps you avoid those misinterpretations. That can happen really easily when you're talking about, subtle feelings in a second language.
Right.
And it allows you to really, pinpoint what you're feeling and communicate it accurately to the other person.
Yeah.
And ultimately, clear communication builds a stronger foundation for mutual understanding.
Right. It's not just about getting the grammar, right?
Right.
It's about making sure that your message lands in the way that you intend it to.
Absolutely.
Now, what practical tips does your material give for overcoming those language barriers?
So your sources have some really good suggestions. Regular practice is key. And that can be, as simple as like chatting with people online or joining English conversation groups just to kind of get comfortable with the language.
Just to get that exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They also suggest starting with simpler language and gradually building up to more complex vocabulary as you feel more confident.
So don't try to do too much at once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start small.
Start small.
And then getting feedback from, friends or language teachers on how you're communicating can be super valuable.
Yeah, get that outside perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine building confidence is a huge part of this too.
Oh, absolutely.
Being able to communicate effectively in English, especially about something so personal.
Yeah.
How can people boost that confidence?
Well, like we were saying before, practice is really the key.
Okay.
The sources specifically recommend role-playing.
Okay.
Imagine different conversations about the friend zone and just practice what you might say.
Like rehearse it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And recording yourself speaking can also be really helpful.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because you can listen back and see, where you might want to improve.
Right, yeah, and identify maybe where you get nervous or...
Yeah, exactly.
Or stumble over your words.
Exactly. Yeah. And then just reflecting on your progress and adjusting your strategies as you go will definitely help build your confidence over time.
Practice, get feedback, reflect.
That's it.
Love it. Okay, so let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here.
Okay.
What are some of the key English words and phrases that are really useful when we're talking about the friend zone?
Well, having the right vocabulary is really important.
Yeah.
Some of the key terms that come up in the material are, friend zone itself,
Right.
obviously, but also unrequited feelings. When one person's feelings aren't returned.
Right.
Platonic.
Yeah.
To describe a friendship that's not romantic. Understanding boundaries in relationships is really important.
Yeah.
Huge. Miscommunication, being aware of those potential pitfalls. And then reciprocity.
Oh, yeah.
Which is this idea of a mutual sharing of feelings.
Right. So both people feeling the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So those are like the foundational terms.
Right.
What about like slang or more casual language?
Yeah.
Are there any idioms?
Yeah, there are actually quite a few.
Okay.
Stuck in the friend zone is a really common one.
Right.
To describe that feeling of being trapped.
Yeah.
You might also hear people say that they've been friend zoned.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a shorthand way of explaining the situation.
Right.
You might also hear on the back burner.
Yeah.
Which sometimes suggests that, somebody is keeping that romantic possibility open.
Right.
But not actively pursuing it.
Yeah, like just in case.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then the opposite of being friend zoned would be like hitting it off.
Oh, yeah.
When two people connect romantically right away.
Right, sparks fly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing these idioms can really help you understand
Yeah.
what people mean in these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the material also talks about how important your tone is.
Yeah.
And the subtle ways that you use language.
Yeah.
Especially with such a sensitive conversation.
So it's delicate.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of like how to use empathetic language and,
Sure.
and neutral language?
Yeah, so using empathetic language shows that you're thinking about the other person's feelings.
Right.
You're not just like, blurting out your feelings.
Right.
So you might say something like, I really value our friendship.
Uh-huh.
And I also want to be honest about some feelings I've been having.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of start gently.
Right, ease into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a more neutral description, you might say, I've noticed that our relationship has been platonic.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see if you feel the same way.
Right.
And if there's any possibility for it to be more, and that's just stating the facts without blaming anyone.
Yeah.
And then a more balanced approach would be something like, I understand if you don't feel the same way, but I thought it was important to be open with you about how I feel.
Yeah, and that kind of gives them an out too.
Right. It acknowledges that they might not.
That it might not be reciprocated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really about just being thoughtful
Yeah.
about how you phrase things.
Now, before you even have this conversation, there's a lot of thinking that you need to do on your own.
Oh, absolutely.
So what kind of guidance does the material give on preparing for this?
Okay, so self-reflection is the first step.
Okay.
The material really stresses the importance of understanding your own emotions.
Yeah.
Maybe writing them down.
Oh, yeah, journaling.
Journaling, exactly.
Yeah.
Identifying what triggers those feelings.
Right.
And then really clarifying what you hope to achieve with this conversation.
So know yourself.
Know yourself exactly.
Figure out what you want.
Right.
What's the point of this conversation?
Yeah. Are you looking for clarity?
Yeah.
Are you hoping to change the relationship?
Right.
Or do you just want to be honest about how you feel?
Right.
And that's okay too.
Okay, so once you know yourself,
right.
What's next?
Okay, so once you have that self-awareness, the material advises setting clear goals for the conversation.
Right, so not just going in blind.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, think about, what kind of emotional clarity you're hoping for.
Yeah.
What would be your ideal outcome?
Right.
And, try to have realistic expectations about what the conversation can actually achieve.
Yeah, because it's not a magic spell.
Right.
It's not going to suddenly make them fall in love with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So being prepared for different possibilities is really important.
Okay. Keep your expectations in check.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to actually having this conversation in English,
okay,
what kind of planning should you do?
All right. So planning your approach in English involves a few steps. The material recommends jotting down the main points that you want to cover.
Okay.
So your feelings, what you're hoping for, any questions that you have.
Right.
Practice saying those things out loud, even if it's just to yourself.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get used to the words.
Yeah, just to familiarize yourself with the language.
Yeah.
And then if you can get feedback from a friend or somebody you're learning English with on how clear and natural your phrasing sounds.
Oh, it's so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be super helpful.
So it's like rehearsing for the main event.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, when you actually sit down to have this conversation,
right,
how does the material suggest that you structure it?
Okay, so, a well-organized conversation can make things so much smoother.
Right, especially when it's a potentially awkward situation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So the material suggests starting gently,
Okay.
maybe by saying, you know how much you value the friendship
Mm-hmm.
and that you just wanted to be open about your feelings. And then, express your own feelings clearly.
Okay.
Using I statements.
I
feel exactly, being honest, but always respectful.
Of course.
And then if it feels right, you can explain what you mean by the friend zone
Okay.
in the context of your relationship.
Right.
And then just really make sure that you're actively listening
Right.
to what the other person is saying.
Yeah, don't just talk at them.
No, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
Give them time to respond. Maybe
Yeah.
even repeat back what you think you heard to make sure that you understood correctly.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then be ready for a range of emotions,
Yeah.
both yours and theirs.
Yeah. You don't know how they're going to react.
You don't know how you're going to react.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the material suggests that, you try to stay calm, acknowledge their feelings,
Yeah.
and, if things get too intense, you can always suggest taking a break.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to step away for a minute.
Exactly.
Cool. So it's about sharing your thoughts,
Right.
but also being a good listener.
Right. And being prepared for whatever happens.
Whatever happens, right?
Yeah.
Now, are there any communication techniques that the material highlights
Yeah.
as being particularly effective in these situations?
Yeah. So a few techniques stand out.
Okay.
Finding a balance between being assertive,
Yeah.
clearly stating your feelings and what you hope for,
Uh-huh.
but also being empathetic,
Right.
showing that you understand the other person's perspective.
Yeah, so it's not just about you.
Right. It's about both of you.
Yeah.
The material also mentions that, using humor carefully
Yeah.
can sometimes ease tension.
Right. But you got to be careful.
Yeah. You gotta be really mindful of the situation.
Yeah, you don't want to make light of something that's
Sure.
really serious.
Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, it points out that, positive nonverbal cues,
Oh, yeah.
like making eye contact, having relaxed body language, smiling genuinely, can really contribute to a positive interaction.
Yeah. But people can tell if you're not being genuine,
They can. Yeah.
Okay, so the material also gives some really practical examples
Yeah.
of how to actually start these conversations
Right.
and kind of navigate them. Can you share a couple of those?
Sure. Yeah. So one example is how to bring up those deeper feelings
Okay.
while still showing that you value the friendship.
Okay.
So you might say something like, our friendship means a lot to me. And recently I've realized I've developed some feelings that go beyond friendship.
Yeah.
I wanted to be honest with you about this, but my priority is also to respect our connection, whatever your feelings are.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Another example is, what to do when you sense that you and the other person might see the relationship differently.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. So you could say something like, sometimes I get the feeling that we might have different ideas about where our relationship could go, and I wanted to see if we could just talk about it openly
Right.
and understand each other better.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And the material also talks about role playing.
Right.
How is role playing helpful?
So role-playing, like we talked about before, is a really good way to build your confidence
Right.
and get comfortable expressing these kinds of feelings in English.
Yeah.
So, by practicing with a friend or a language partner, you can try out different ways of saying things,
Yeah.
and you can practice how you might react to different responses that you might get.
Right, because you don't know what they're going to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a safe space to experiment
Right.
and kind of refine your approach.
Okay, so it's like a dress rehearsal
Yeah,
before the big show.
exactly.
Okay, now even with all the best preparation in the world,
Right.
there are going to be challenges.
Yeah, of course.
What advice does the material give for dealing with things like rejection
Yeah.
or misunderstandings?
Okay, so dealing with rejection gracefully is super important.
It is.
Yeah, the material emphasizes that, if you are rejected, try to remember that it's not a judgment of you as a person.
Right.
It's just that
It's just not a match
it's not a match at this time.
at this time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it suggests responding respectfully, maybe saying that you appreciate their honesty
Right.
and that you still value their friendship.
Right.
And then just allowing yourself time to process those feelings and to move forward.
It's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
It's okay to be disappointed.
Absolutely. Yeah, allow yourself to feel those feelings.
Right.
And then when it comes to misunderstanding, the advice is to always ask for clarification and to try rephrasing things just to make sure that you're both on the same page.
So important.
Yeah.
Communication is key.
Communication is key.
Yeah.
What about when emotions run high?
Right.
How do we handle that? Yeah, so the material advises that, if the conversation starts to get really emotionally charged, it's totally okay to suggest taking a break.
Yeah.
Stepping away for a little while can give everyone a chance to kind of calm down.
Right.
And think more clearly.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a minute.
Exactly. Yeah.
To collect your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also recommends focusing on expressing your own feelings.
Yeah.
Using those I statements.
I feel this. I feel that.
Exactly. Yeah. Rather than, making accusations or blaming the other person.
Yeah, which can just escalate the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really about just trying to keep things calm and focused.
Right. Stay focused on your own experience.
Yeah.
Now, the material also has some more advanced strategies for navigating these situations.
Yeah, for those who are feeling a little bit more adventurous.
Yeah.
So some of the more advanced techniques include using, more descriptive adjectives and relevant idioms to add more nuance to what you're saying.
Okay.
It also suggests adapting your communication style to different situations.
Yeah.
So, a casual conversation with a friend might allow for a lighter tone.
Right.
Than a more serious discussion, where you're really laying your heart on the line.
Right, and your word choice is going to be different.
Absolutely, yeah. And then finally, making sure that your body language and facial expressions match what you're saying can make your communication much more impactful.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really about taking those communication skills to the next level to match the complexity of the situation.
Now, for you, our listener, who's working on improving their English,
right?
What digital tools and resources does your material suggest?
So your sources recommend a whole bunch of different tools.
Okay, great.
Yeah. For building vocabulary and practicing pronunciation, apps like Duolingo Babbel, Rosetta Stone are great.
Yeah.
Anki is also mentioned as a helpful tool for memorizing vocabulary. Okay.
To connect with other English speakers, online forums, language exchange platforms like HelloTalk Tandem can be really valuable.
Right.
And then for more passive learning, listening to English language podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
Can help you pick up natural English.
Yeah.
The English We Speak Grammar Girl.
Cool.
YouTube channels like English with Lucy.
Yeah.
Speak English with Vanessa offer practical language tips and examples.
Awesome.
And then, of course, don't forget traditional resources like English language books and articles about communication skills.
Yeah, and I think one thing that the material mentions that I really like is this idea of keeping a daily journal in English.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So that you're constantly practicing.
Right.
Practicing conversations with others, getting feedback on your communication.
Right.
And even recording yourself to see how you can improve.
Absolutely.
I think those are all fantastic ways to build your skills. Yeah, it's about actively engaging with the language.
Yeah.
In different ways to build both your fluency and your confidence.
Awesome. Okay, so this has been a really deep dive into the friend zone and how to navigate it effectively in English.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important thing to remember?
I think the core message is that navigating the friend zone, like any complex relationship, requires a blend of honesty about your own feelings, empathy for the other person, and clear, effective communication, especially when you're doing it in English.
So important.
So important. It's about expressing yourself authentically while respecting the other person's perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From defining what the friend zone is, busting those myths, to offering specific strategies, key vocabulary, practical examples, even some exercises you can do.
Exactly.
What was the goal here?
Our goal was to give you the tools and the understanding that you need to approach these conversations with more clarity.
Right.
And more confidence.
Yeah, I think we did that.
I think so too.
So as you're thinking about all this, take some time to think about your own communication style.
Yeah.
Think about the dynamics in your relationships.
Absolutely.
And, your sources suggest understanding the friend zone can actually help you build stronger, more genuine connections with people.
Yeah.
Whether or not a specific conversation leads to romance.
Exactly.
It's just about improving your relationships overall.
Right.
And don't forget about those digital tools.
Yes.
Keep learning, Keep practicing.
Keep practicing.
And thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See you next